regular email blast, just add them under the chat section. You don't have to, but if you would like, that would be nice. So joy, I don't know about you guys, but I'm finding joy is quite elusive these days in our groundhog experience of sort of repeating the same thing every day, that it's becoming a bit more elusive. And so I've really been looking at the subtlety of joy and looking at the ways that will evoke my experience of joy. Life presents so many blocks. Joy is always there, but the subtlety of it under the surface it can become buried. And so with joy, we don't search for it, we reveal it. We simply strip off layers, we uncover it, we coax it forward. I'm in Tennessee, as many of you know, working with my teacher on creating the space for a new Devi, a divine feminine temple. And I asked him about the energy in the space. She's not yet here, but we have a space and we're trying to create a certain ambiance. And I asked him I can feel something in the space already, but she's not there. And he smiled and he said, we have to create the environment so that we coax her here. And I was thinking about that with our joy, that we have to coax it out in times like we have now, which are requiring us to, sort of a paradox. In many ways, we're narrowing the tunnel through which we're experiencing life by doing fewer things and having less interaction with the broader world. And yet in many ways, we're expanding it. We're having circles like this where people who don't know one another are joining and we're hearing different stories. So there's this tension between the closing in and the expanding out that's happening out of our control. It's just happening in the world. It's almost as though Mother Nature, Pachamama, the planet is taking a breath and we're in the contraction and the expansion. We're in the birthing labor of the new world that's coming and we can't escape it. The baby's coming. There's no getting out of it now. We've invited it in and now we have to set the conditions for the experience. So I look at, what are the conditions in my life that I can change so that joy reveals itself more naturally or easily. One of the things that many of you on the call today know Rooney. She was a part of our Spirit House Circle, and her partner Pablo told me once, he was helping me in the medicinal garden, and I asked him about one of the plants, and he said, oh, that's the antidote to poison oak. And I said, really? And he said, yes, in the native ways, we understand that the natural arrangement is such that where there's something that you need an antidote for, it is there. So growing along the creek bed and the banks of the creek behind Spirit House, where much of the poison oak would grow, this other plant grew wild naturally as an antidote to the poison oak. And I was so intrigued with this concept of looking deeply enough into the natural world around us to see that what we need to feed us and have our sustenance, even during challenging times, is already there. So how do we look differently for it? Just as Shelley was saying, taking an experience to be outside of the world that we're normally in these last few months and have a different experience. How are we expanding within the confines of what we can't change? And so I'm looking for the antidote. What's the antidote that allows me to still sit in that seat of joy, in that elusive place of joy that is the reason we call it a fragrance? City and I chatted about this. And the reason that we call it a fragrance is because it's so ephemeral. It's so elusive. You walk into somebody's home or you pass by someone and you can sense something, you smell something, it wafts across in front of you, revealing itself, but just ever so slightly. Joy is that way. It's so sweetly elusive and just subtle under the surface that we have to strip off layers to experience it. We have so many blocks going on right now in our experience of the world, overwhelming obstacles that I know many of you are being faced with right now. And of course, the world is facing these obstacles and one similar. And it's causing a collective, as Siddhi said earlier, we're not breathing deeply. It's creating a collective holding of our breath. So nothing is more important right now than the breath. And here we are on the West Coast with the breath being even a challenging thing because the air quality is so poor. So we have to really find ways to breathe, even if it's not out in nature right now, even if it's in a more contained space, to really work with our breath. Pranayama is never more important than it is right now. So back to my job is self-transformation, personal transformation. How do I get there? Personal transformation is the road to joy. So it's a very linear path. It's not even that mystical or magic, or it's quite obvious if we really start to look at it. First, it's like the ingredients. What are the ingredients to getting to something? If you're setting the condition for something to show up, you'll do certain things, whether it's temperature, or think about if you're baking bread. You're going to set certain conditions to be just right for that bread to rise. You're not going to expect it to rise if you set it out in the rain, in the cold environment. You're not going to expect that. So we have to set the conditions within our body, our mind, and our spirit in order for us to be able to imagine and to experience this joy rising. It's the condition that we're responsible for. It's not that the joy is already there, but without the condition, it's harder for us to experience it. So personal transformation is simply about changing and working, refining the conditions of your life in the ways that you can. So much of what's happening to us right now it's outside of our control, but very much of what we have as our life experience is part of in our control. And so we need to really look at what are the pieces we can impact and where can't we. So I look at how do I change the conditions? The main place that I can impact is in my mind and my body, because those two things are going to give me the portal to my spiritual experience. So one of the beautiful things that we talk about and that I've heard in psychology is that often if you're in a psychology session and you're very anxious and things are spilling out of you and the story that you need to tell can't even be told, the counselor and therapist will often really calm down his or her voice, calm down their presence, and speak to you in a very soft tone. And you naturally will mimic that. That will bring your blood pressure and your anxiety down just sitting with them as they hold a very calm space. So one of the conditions that I need to maintain in my life is a regular pattern and discipline and practice of sitting still. So part of what we do here when Siddhi takes you through the pranayama and the movement is to get us back inside of our body so that we then can take the time to settle it. We need to settle our body. So self-transformation has to begin with us having settling ourselves in a way that allows us to take the next step. So some people settle in nature. Taking a hike is settling to them. Some sitting on a yoga cushion in front of their altar is settling. Some settling is being out with just sitting in your courtyard or outside your space in the sun, having the sunlight across your face is very settling. But my job of self-transformation requires that I take the time to create the condition where my body and my mind are working with me, not against me. So that's why we do these practices, so that our condition changes. And when our condition changes, then our mind settles, our body settles, and joy becomes a revealing experience. That's why so many people will say, oh, I felt that spark of joy when I was doing certain things, because those things were so, they brought you in so deeply and so powerfully that you were not actually distracted. Most of life is a distraction, honestly, from the real centeredness that we're looking for. Most of life is a distraction. And we layer on the distractions because they keep us busy. And when we're busy, we don't have to be thinking about things we don't want to think about or worry about. But the key is to be able to sit in silence and not think about those things, to be able to actually close the walls for just a few minutes a day and restore. We all have things that we're worried about. And in this time, we're not only worried about ourselves, we're worried about our extended families, we're worried about our neighbors, we're worried about our country, we're worried about the universe. Everything is up for worry right now. Excuse me. And the collective, the collective response to that is overwhelming. We can feel it. We feel it in those around us. We feel it in the news for sure. We feel it all everywhere we turn. There's something else that you could worry about for sure. Humanity is being challenged. There's no way to get out of that. That's what's happening. So now more than any time, we're called to settle ourselves. So one of the ways to look at how we get to this self-transformation and then ultimately to revealing the joy that is already inherently in our system is to look at the integration of our body, mind, spirit. So what we talk about in yoga is that it yokes us. It yokes the aspects of us. We are physical. That's what we're here in this container of physicality. We are also mental, but we have a spirit. This is also a part of our experience. So how do we integrate all three of those in a balance that allows us to then be in a centered place that experiences joy in the tiniest of ways? The joy that effusiveness of joy is just around us, that we become joy, the joy that we already are. We just own it. We own the juiciness of it. We own the subtlety of it. We own the tiniest pieces of it and the largest, grandest pieces of it. So one of the things that I look at in that triad is how to take care of my body, and how my body is so tethered to my mind and my spirit journey. I can't just separate it out, but I have to deal with it. Because most of the things in almost all teachings now, other than an acute situation where you may have an illness that's genetic, or you've been in an accident and you've injured yourself in some way, but most of our physical ailments start in the energetic body. So before we ever even know that we have a difficulty in our body, it's already breaking down in our energy system. And that's why many of the other what we would call non-traditional medicines are now looking at the energetic body and what's happening. This is not new. This has been studied in Ayurveda. It's been studied in Buddhist and Taoist. And I mean, you can look at any of the ancient teachings and they talk about the energetic body as an integral part of understanding the whole body. But we mostly look at the physicality of it. So one of the things I wanted to do today was to ask one of our participants is actually studying for her master's in integrative medicine. And I'm really taken with integrative medicine as I am with Ayurvedic and with functional medicine as ways to work on handling our stress and looking at our lifestyle. So I wanted to ask Laura just to speak to us for a couple of minutes about what she's learned about integrative medicine and how we might incorporate some of the teachings of integrative medicine into our lives now before what's happening in our subtlety of our body becomes a major physical issue. What do we have control over? And so I need to unmute. Laura, you'll have to unmute yourself. And I don't know if, City, if you have to unmute her also.
Can you hear me?
Yeah.
We can hear you.
Okay.
Super.
Thank you, Nikki. So I'm Laura Perry, and I am in my second year of a master's program in integrative health through CIIS. It's a university in San Francisco. And integrative health, as Nikki just described, it's pretty much the meshing of Western conventional medicine with complementary modalities. And it's a whole person approach to looking at optimal health instead of just through an organ system. So if you are having digestive problems, for instance, in a conventional approach would be, to look at your digestion and find out that you have leaky gut, and then you will go through a series of tests to determine that you have a food intolerance, and all of this is very important. One of the most important things I've learned is that you have to listen to your body. You are the guide. If you don't listen to something and it goes on for years or months, there's a problem that's starting. And by the time that that you do something about it, if you wait, then you are seeing a doctor for illness instead of a precautionary principle and observing your body, that you have more of a hold on it. We're the protagonists of our own story right now. So really, really listen to your body. And the integrative approach, as I said, it's not just looking at the physical body, as Nikki said, it's looking at your emotional health and your mental health and your spiritual health and your social health. When I work with clients, there's something called a wellness wheel, and it has everything from spirituality to recreation, because we all need to have fun and connectedness. And of course, there's nutrition, and there's exercise and movement and sleep. Let's not forget about sleep, especially during this time right now. Sleep is when our body restores and repairs. Sleep is very, very important to almost all of our 12 systems of our body. If you have lots of people right now are suffering from different types of insomnia. The type that's the most common right now that has to do with worrying is when you go to sleep naturally and then you wake up and you're up for a couple of hours in the night. For women our age, this is especially prevalent as our estrogen levels have declined. So there's a lot you can do for really good sleep hygiene. You can set a good sleep routine up. You can not eat 3 hours before you go to bed, not exercise 3 hours before you go to bed. So the integrative approach is all of that. It's mostly noticing that something is not right and then looking at all of the ways to fix it. And I'm going to just give you a couple of things. Nikki, you can start waving your arms when you want me to.
Okay, you get a little bit more, and then we have to go on to meditate. I should have given you more time.
No. So the only thing I would say, there's a couple of things you guys can do right now. The fires, the air is poor. You don't really want to be outside right now because a respiratory, anything that's not good for your respiratory actually would make a COVID symptom more severe. So the couple of things that I could say is slow down when you eat. It's not what you eat anymore, it's what you absorb. You are what you absorb. So really, really try to sit down and chew. Optimal chewing is 20 to 30 times. It helps with all sorts of nutrient absorption. And just remember, as you're chewing, you're giving yourself healthy nutrients and it's being absorbed in your small intestine. And the more you get it ready, the more you chew it into a pulp, the easier it will absorb. Okay? That's it for today.
That's excellent. Thank you. That's the hardest thing for me to do, is to chew slowly and repeatedly. I basically gulp. So thank you, Laura. There's so much more we want to talk about with this. This is just the beginning of the integration discussion of how we integrate ourselves in a wholeness that allows joy to emerge, the joy that's already in you. So I'm going to turn it over to City to just allow us to settle down now as we close our time out. And there's just so much that we have to share that's going forward. I know each of you have things that you can share that are useful for the whole of us. So we're going to start working on that, where we can each share pieces. But thank you, Laura, for kicking that off today.
Before we start with the meditation, I just wanted to acknowledge that we forgot to turn on the video. So it just turned on later. Yeah, so there is a video. It starts with Nirmala's talk. You're so imperfect. But anyway, so, and I really liked your sharing. That was so beautiful. And I want to start our meditation with something I came across. My teacher once said, when joy has a reason, it is not going to last long. When joy is without any reason, it is going to be there forever. And I thought that's so beautiful for us as a container, you know. So finding really the joy within, it's not depending on anything on the outside. So, and you just spoke about, you know, sleep problems, and I see that all around me. But I see also how lethargic and tired people are right now. You know, so many people say, God, I could just sleep, you know. So, and I wanted to share with you a mudra that can give you energy. So it's really beautiful. So you take your left hand and you just bring your left middle finger and the tip of your thumb together, just on your left. And now you squeeze your right thumb in between the middle finger and the left thumb. And you just sit here in front of your solar plexus and heart center, right there. And you close your eyes, long, deep breath. And just feel into it, how the fingers are right now doing their work. How the nerve endings in your left middle finger and your left thumb actually activating the nerve endings in your right thumb. So there's a whole communication going on within. And then I want you just to think very slowly and stay, and we did it before because I think it's so powerful, is this so hum. So on the inhalation, you mentally recite so, and on the exhalation, hum. I am. And for those who feel uncomfortable with the Sanskrit word, you can just mentally I on the inhalation, M on the exhalation. Allow your breath to become long, slow, and deep. And when your mind starts to wander, just become aware of it. And then come back to Soham, or I am. And take a deep inhalation. Exhale, open mouth. Inhale. And exhale. One more time. Bring our hands together into prayer pose. We bow towards our body and our soul. Tuning into our V space. And seeing if we can keep this V space within us throughout the day. We tune out with Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Shanti, Shanti, Shanti. So wishing you all to stay in joy. Have a beautiful weekend. I will have to leave today, so I will turn off, but maybe you still want to sit. Yeah, so you can do this.